Ah. There are moments in my career as a minister where a voice pops up inside of me and says, "Follow that." It seems like every time you get up to sing, I hear that voice. So, right? Yeah. And then I do. So, you're at a party, and someone says to you, "Who are you?" What do you say? You say, "I am God." And then they say, "Oh, good. Hey." Now, it would be nice if we actually were able to say, "Oh, I'm God, and so are you," right? But probably the world's not ready for that yet. But instead, what we do is we say, "Oh, I'm a doctor," or I'm James Mellon, I'm a minister," and then they go, "Okay." So, but you may come up with whatever version of you think you are. But it's a really important question. Who are you? Who am I? When asked, "Who am I?" it's a really important question to ask ourselves sometimes. So I'm teaching this class, The Exquisite Risk, and on Tuesday night, 60 people showed up to take the class in Westfield Mall, in Westlake Village. And it was amazing because that class I have designed in a way I've never designed a class before. I put every group into a group of 4, all facing each other, and it's a very interactive class where you must be willing to be fearless in answering these incredible questions that Mark Nepo asks in the book, The Exquisite Risk. So it was really fascinating to watch the room, because I get to really watch the room as I pose the question, and then they go deep into answering these questions. And as I was watching the room, and as I was watching the class on Tuesday night, on Wednesday night I couldn't teach it because I had to fly out of town, and Reverend Jonathan Zenz taught it here. Luckily, I called Jonathan and I said, "Come on Tuesday, I need you to see what I'm going to do, and then you can do it on Wednesday." So it was great. But this question, who am I? Ultimately, every question backs itself into, who am I? And we spend our whole lives coming up with answers to that, and at different points in our lives, we answer it different ways. I think about my life. I answered it for years. "Oh, I'm an actor." Actually, I always said I'm a Broadway actor. I'm a Broadway actor. I'm a father. I answered it like that for years when I first had children. I still say it all the time. I still say it. I'm a father. Or I'm a husband, or whatever. Whatever word you use, it's still just something you've done with who you are. So Ernest Holmes, in the very first chapters of the book, The Science of Mind, spends a lot of time defining God, the thing itself. Then he talks about what it does, how to use it, all this stuff in the first 4 chapters to explain to us who God is. And it's a lot of intelligent, smart, philosophical, passionate work on changing our understanding of who God is, from a God up in the sky judging us or literally manipulating our lives, into this energy that we are. And it's what got me into this science. I heard David Walker explain this, and I was hooked. I was like, yeah, that's what I believe. And it was amazing. But by the end of his life, Ernest Holmes, who started in 1927 with this book, by the end of his life, he basically was saying, everything I said about God is true about you. That's who you are. There's no separation. There's not the absolute and the relative. There is just the absolute playing out on a relative plane. So that's where we've come to. So if all this is true about God, then all of this is true about me. And in 1948, which was 12 years before he passed, so this was well into his ministry, he wrote this in a book called The Art of Life. He said this: "Life is infinite energy coupled with limitless creative imagination. Therefore, I am infinite energy coupled with limitless creative imagination." That's who I am. That's who you are. Because if that's what God is, that's what I am. So how do I ever get blocked creatively? I don't. I have just put a block in front of my creative infinite creative imagination. That's all that's happening. All we have to do is remove the block and step back into who we truly are. He goes on to say, it is the invisible essence and substance of every visible form. Its nature, God's nature, your nature, my nature, is goodness, truth, wisdom, beauty, as well as energy and imagination. So we're all of this. Now, wouldn't that be a hell of a thing to say at a party? Could you imagine? Who are you? I am the infinite creative energy of the universe. I am goodness, wisdom, truth, beauty, peace, power, passion, love. Who are you? Just imagine. He goes on to say, our highest satisfaction comes from a sense of conscious union with this invisible life. So our highest satisfaction, he says, all human endeavor, meaning everything we do, why we do everything, all human endeavor is an attempt to get back to first principles, to find such an inward wholeness that all sense of fear, doubt, and uncertainty vanishes. Now, I don't know about you, but I came into this science looking for a way to get rid of fear, doubt, and uncertainty in my life. How many of you join me in that? We all came here for some reason. We landed here for some reason because there was something that was being said that hit us. And I got to tell you, when I heard there was a power for good in the universe and you can use it, it tackled me. And it said, this is it. Listen. And as you all know, I went from Catholicism to Christianity to Buddhism to A Course in Miracles to back to Buddhism, all on my path to unity, to a more Christian understanding of New Thought. And then I heard Dr. Walker really quote Ernest Holmes, and that was it for me because I understood it from everything I came from. So the title of my talk tonight is Roots. And when I called Barbara to give her my talk title, she said, you mean the Alex Haley? Alex Haley. Is it Alex Haley? Yes. Alex Haley movie? I went, no. And yet, it kind of is a little bit without going to the story. So the title of my talk is Roots. So Ernest Holmes basically told us about our roots in God, as God. Yes? This is our roots. This is where I come from. This is where you come from. This is where we all come from. And you have heard me say many times that all that stuff that happened in the past in your life mean nothing. It only means what you decide it to mean, and it is only usable to the degree that you've decided to believe everything that has brought you this way. Tonight, I would like to take a different approach to this. I'd like to come at it from a much more positive side of understanding my roots. Where did I come from? And I invite you to join me in this journey. Where did you come from? Because that's usually the second question. Who are you? Where are you from? So, where am I from? So this week, as you know, last week I was in Guatemala. I got home on Saturday, had a beautiful time Sunday in our services. And then right at the top of the week, Kevin's father had a stroke. And we had already been told, and he knew he was on a countdown with cancer, that he had stopped all of his treatments and he had been told, here's how much time you have to live. But then the stroke hit, and so it was much shorter. And so we both decided instantly to get on a plane and fly to Rochester. As soon as I finished Tuesday's class, we went that next morning to Rochester. And so there's nothing like going home for something like that to get you in touch with your roots, to really solidify that. But this was Kevin's family. And I can tell you this, that Kevin's father, 30 years ago when we met, when Kevin first realized that he had fallen in love with me, and he was married at the time, so there was a lot of change going on in his life at that time. He went home to tell his parents, and his father's first sentence was, I love you regardless. I love you because of who you are, not in spite of. He said, and I'm sure I will love James when I meet him. And so, a few months later, he met me, and was as loving and open, which was kind of difficult because I was late arriving. I showed up about 4 hours late because at that time, Kevin hadn't yet really had a grip on controlling my life yet. we, we had only been together, he's with the kids tonight, but he heard all this morning. We had only been together a few months. So he hadn't really grown into the telling me I had to be on time. And so, I don't know about you, but when I go to the airport, if my flight's at noon, I'd like to get there around 11:30, right. So I got to the airport and, the plane took off early. Now that's not my fault. No, it really did. It took off early. And so because of that, they gave us a trip they flew us to Albany instead of Rochester and hired a car to drive us from Albany down to Rochester. So we got there around 4 hours late for a sit-down dinner that his mother had placed on the table. This is them meeting me. And I, at the time, was a vegetarian, and there wasn't a vegetable to be found. It was Rochester, and it was meat and potatoes. That was it. And I remember walking in the door and Kevin turning to me and say, "You'll eat every piece of meat on that table." And I did. That was the beginning of the next 30 years. You'll eat every piece of meat. So that is to say that this is a very dear family to me. And they took me in as a son, and I call Dudley Dad, and I call Barbara Mom, and I have for 30 years. And so when we got to Rochester, Dudley was in the hospital, and somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I ended up driving the family truck. Now, Dudley is a very strong, powerful hunter. I mean, he hunts deers and bears and has them all over their lodge to prove that he has hunted them. Needless to say, this has not been one of my favorite attributes of the Bailey brothers, that they are hunters. And I even said to Kevin once, I was like, "Honey, you've never killed a deer." And he went, "I have." I was like, "No, you killed Bambi?" But I want to tell you a little story about Dudley Bailey. So, first of all, I got this truck. So I had to literally drive this huge butch truck. I mean, it was a formidable truck. In fact, it was such a big truck that when I stepped out of it, I fell onto the ground because I didn't realize how high it was. Yeah, which was not, it was like a Jerry Lewis movie. It was like, and I was like, I'm good. Yeah. So everybody was busy doing everything, and I got to take Mom to and from the hospital for the 4 days I was there. And so I go to pick up his mother the first morning after I got there, and she was in the kitchen talking with Kevin's older brother, and they had a lot of papers, as you can only imagine, because Dudley, he is still with us, but he will pass shortly. And they were going over paperwork, so I just kept myself busy, and I walked into the living room. Now, Mom has about 300 pictures in her house. She told me that it's over 300, but she stopped counting at 300. They're all over the house. Every surface that is possible to put something on, it is picture after picture after picture. So I was like in this house while they were talking, surrounded by my whole last 30 years, because I was everywhere around the room. Barbara and Dudley's whole 60 years of marriage, and looking at their pictures from when they were young, when they first got married, till now. There was a moment where I picked up a picture of me and Kevin when we first got together on that first trip there, and then a picture of him and I and Bernadette Peters from the opening night of Andy, Get Your Gun. And I just looked at them and I was like, so much has happened between here and here. And there were pictures of my children from the time they were tiny little infants all the way through till last summer when we went finally to their camp, because I had to give in. It's been 30 years I've been with Kevin, and I always managed to get out of going up to the camp that has the deer heads on it. I always had something else to do. There was no hotel anywhere nearby, so I was like, can't get there and stay at the lodge. So finally last summer we went, and it was spectacular. And we went because my children, they were like, yeah, let's go hunt. I was like, who is my family? It's like, I gave birth to these children. Well, I did the other side of it. And I did the hard part. And don't you love that? In 3 months, you will know how wrong I am. She's about to have her first child. Yes, so excited. Let's give that. Can you check? So anyway, we go to the lodge, and Dudley just showed us around the lodge and explained something to me. And this is all about, the reason why I bring all this up is because there's a lot to do with our roots and what we perceive and yet what we learn. So he explained to me, and there was a sign on his lodge about how it's a responsible lodge, and that in Rochester in the winter, many deer die of freezing. They just freeze to death. And the hunter's job is to keep the flocks thin enough that those flocks can live. And then they use all of the meat. They use it all. And as he's explaining all this to me, and I'm looking at his whole, and we got in those, what were they called, Nora? What were those things we were driving? ATVs. And we're driving all over the acreage, and it was just fascinating. And I am so grateful that we had that last summer, not knowing what this summer would bring. And so I'm in the room, and I'm looking at all of these pictures, and there was a moment when I picked one up, and it knocked over about 50. Did you ever have that? I picked it up, and it went, and I hear Mom in the other room. She goes, "It's fine, happens all the time, just pick them up." And so I'm picking them up, and I said to her, "It's really dusty in there." And she says, "I know, it's hard to dust them all." I said, "Kevin will do it when he comes back. I'll tell him." And I volunteered him to dust when he goes back. So as I'm in there and all the pictures are around me, I had this huge aha, and it was this. Kevin is his father, and I used to make fun of him. I'd be like, "Oh my God, you're just like your father," because his father is very stubborn, and Kevin is very stubborn. Actually, all of the Baileys are very stubborn. And a little story, one summer, when they first met us, when I first met them, they came and spent some time in LA, and I was in a tree in my backyard with one of those electric cutter things, saws. There is another name for that. I just don't know what it is. And I'm up there cutting down branches, and Dudley is under the tree saying, "James, here's how you do it." And I just wanted to kill him. I was like, "I know how to trim my tree." And so they're very headstrong men, and they're usually right, which is more annoying. But they're very headstrong. And I used to always say to Kevin in moments of his headstrong, "You're just like your father." And I would mean it not in a very pleasant way, which really annoyed Kevin. And then I'm standing in this living room, and I suddenly got it. And I went, "You are just like your father." And I am so blessed because of that. Because Kevin's father is a rooted man, rooted in family values. He loves his wife and his family in a way that I did not grow up with. And it is so powerful. And it is so watching that family come together with Dudley there. He can't talk anymore, and yet he's still running the room. I mean, it's true. He was trying to point to things and get people to do things. And at one point, I happened to be there when he was asking for something. I'm like, "Water? Do you want this?" And then I love that he could roll his eyes even after a stroke at me. And I said, "Cookies?" And he went, "Oh," as though he'd want cookies right now when he can't eat. And so what he really wanted was a nurse, and the nurse came in, and then he started bossing them around. And I got it. I was like, "Oh my God, what a blessing." There are many things from our past, from our roots, from our parents that we have grown up with. And sometimes I think we throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we throw it all away. And today I'd like to give you an opportunity in remembering who you are, remembering who they were that brought you to where you are. The good, the bad, and the ugly. All the great things that perhaps happened to you in your life that your father may have did, or your mother. All the things in you that you could trace back and look at. You know, I always laughed at my mother. My mother could not sing a lick. I mean, she was the worst singer on the planet, and yet she loved to sing, and she just did it unabashedly. And she would sing this song, "So you met someone who set you back on your heels." You know that song? There you go. Except she didn't sing that in that string of notes. It went in 10 keys simultaneously. but she just did it. And I think she actually got me. I have so much of her in me. You know, Nora has so much of me in her. You do know that. Good luck. So our roots that are tied to people literally transform and literally go into here. I send my roots back here, but go back further and further and further, you get to God. You get to the initiating factor of your life. You come into this world as everything. And then you start being molded by the people, the roots of your family that take you. You know, we take these babies and we start to mold them. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've had as a parent to realize that I'm not in charge, to not try to mold these children the way I would do it. You know, I think about that, I say now, famous story of when when they were riding bikes and she would not get on her bike and put a sweater on because I thought it was cold and I thought she should have a sweater on. And she absolutely refused. It was like, no. And you saw this adult and this little 5-year-old fighting in the middle of the street over a bicycle, at which point finally I just gave up and I just said, you're wrong, I'm right. I put her under my arm, grabbed the bike and walked home. And I won, apparently. Till I went to my therapist and she told me I was an idiot. She was like, if she's not cold, she'll tell you. I was like, oh, no, there's a concept. So there's so much, and here's what I really want to get to. So Ernest Holmes said, never limit your view of life by any past experience. Never limit your view of life by any past experience. I'd like to say this. Be willing to expand your view of life by some past experiences. Be willing to take another look and maybe look back at those roots and see what they grew. Because what comes from the roots? The tree, the plant, the flower. It just grows and grows and grows. It may need to die, but it will fall back down into the ground, into the roots, and come back up again, still attached to those roots. So where in your life do you perhaps need to look back to remember who you are? And to claim it, to be okay with it. Kevin is always okay with being black and white. He's much like your partner. Kevin is black and white, not a lot of gray. I live in gray world. I do. This could be right, this could be right. And I like to be right in the middle, planted. I'm happy with who I am. But so is Kevin. And he is black and white. And there are moments I so respect his ability to say, nope, this is what it is. While I'm going, well, maybe, but it could, I don't know, maybe. And he's like, nope, this is what it is. Maya Angelou said it, right? When someone shows you who they are, believe it the first time. Not the 50th time, which is usually how long it takes me to believe it. And Kevin's father was the same way. So where do you need to go back and look and see what it is that has molded you into the person you are? The good, the bad, and the ugly, whatever it is. Because here's the real point of my talk tonight. What God gave us that is the most precious is choice. You've chosen. Whether you know it or not, you have chosen all of those attributes that were back there, and you've chosen to carry them into this world, to today. I chose to be who I am today. I have chosen to be the man I am today. Sometimes in spite of, sometimes because of, sometimes because I wanted to be even more than what I thought I was. But I have chosen. So if we go back and look, or we see something in ourselves we don't like, we can choose to let that go. But we can also go back and look at things that perhaps we have come from that we can say, oh my God, yes. I love that about my family. I love that about my father, my grandfather. I love that about, and I'm going to make that even bigger. I'm going to expand that. That, by the way, is what I want to do with religious science. Ernest Holmes taught in 1927 one thing, but by 1961, when he died in 1962, he was teaching a whole different story. I feel that most of our churches are still teaching what he taught in 1927, when I'm at 1960 saying, let's go, let's take it, expand it. Here are my roots, but I want to grow the tree. I don't want to live in the ground with the roots. I want to be the tree. And that's who we get to be. And I think that's where we are going. And thank you, you said it so eloquently. That's the truth. That's what it's about. And Ernest Holmes said, if you're still talking about what I was talking about in 1927, you missed the point. Well, I have not missed the point. And this center has not missed the point. So, you are a choice. Next time someone asks you who you are, really give it a thought before you answer it with some relative fact about what you've done with who you are. See if you can't find a way to take the conversation to a much higher level. And remember who you are. Because there are going to be times when you're going to want to say who you are and you're not going to like the answer you have. And then you start. My last story, Dr. David Walker. How many of you know Dr. David Walker? So David Walker was my teacher. And Dr. Bitzer was a minister that Ernest Holmes placed in Los Angeles. So it's Dr. Holmes, Ernest Holmes, Dr. Bitzer, David Walker, me. It's that line of progression. They are the roots. So I went in to tell David something that I was upset about. And I think I had said to him that I had embellished some story and I was really feeling bad about it. And I had lied about something. And he said to me, he said, I need to tell you a story that Dr. Bitzer told me. He said, one day I went in to talk to Dr. Bitzer, and I told him about some embellishment, some lie that I had told. He said, and I was already a minister at the time. He said, and Bitzer looked at me and he said, you didn't lie. You were projecting into the future what you knew you were equal to. And David said, so you need to know that. And I was like, so I haven't been lying all these years? I've just been projecting into the future. Well, yeah, absolutely. So I'm giving you carte blanche to start projecting into the future who you know yourself to be. And then when you project yourself into the future, you actually can start living from that perspective. So when you're asked the question, who am I? Have at it, and then act accordingly. Namaste.